3 months after the revolution began, Captain Deho stood in the rebuilt chambers of the Galactic Assembly, wearing the simple uniform of a Federation representative rather than the battle armor he had worn during the war, and around him the hall buzzed with voices speaking dozens of languages. The massive chamber had been redesigned to accommodate representatives from over 200 species who worked together in committees and subgroups to address problems that had been ignored. For centuries, while the old council focused on maintaining their grip on power, the old Galactic Council had been dissolved completely, and its leaders were serving life sentences on prison worlds where they could contemplate the consequences of their crimes against sentient life while contributing to society through productive labor. In place of the authoritarian council rose the Galactic Federation, founded on principles of equality, cooperation, and shared technological advancement that promised a future where all species could reach their full potential without fear of oppression. Humanity's unique gift for improving alien technology became the foundation for unprecedented innovation as human engineers worked alongside scientists from every member species to develop solutions to problems that had seemed impossible just months before. Engineer Minho collaborated with crystalline scientists whose silicon-based minds processed information in ways that complemented human creativity. And together they developed life support systems that could sustain any known form of life. Dr. Sun He worked with gas giant dwellers whose understanding of atmospheric chemistry had evolved over millions of years, and their partnership produced medical treatments that could heal injuries and diseases that had been considered fatal. The combination of human adaptability and alien expertise produced advances that neither could achieve alone because diversity of thought and approach led to breakthrough discoveries that revolutionized entire fields of science. The memorial station built where Earth once stood served as a reminder of the cost of prejudice and fear while providing a place where young beings from all species could study history and learn why unity was stronger than division. Architect Bo Ram had designed the memorial as more than just a monument to the dead, but as a living symbol of hope that incorporated architectural elements from every member species to create something beautiful that no single culture could have built alone. The station's central chamber contained a holographic display showing Earth as it had been before its destruction, with blue oceans and white clouds and cities that sparkled. In the sunlight, while visitors could hear recordings of human voices speaking in languages that were being learned again, new colonies flourished as humans shared their survival techniques with other refugee populations who had been displaced by wars and natural disasters during the centuries of council rule, and planets that had been written off as uninhabitable bloomed with life. Agricultural specialist Hyun Jin taught soil reclamation techniques to beings whose worlds had been mined by council corporations, and his methods could turn barren wastelands into fertile gardens within months, using combinations of human and alien biotechnology. The galaxy's economy transformed as human innovation spread through trade networks that had stagnated for centuries under council regulations designed to maintain the status quo rather than encourage growth and development. Trade routes that had taken weeks to traverse became efficient superhighways that could be completed in days, while communication networks improved beyond recognition, allowing instant contact between worlds that had been isolated for generations. Energy production doubled as human engineers optimized alien power systems by combining different technologies in ways that their original designers had never considered, and clean fusion reactors replaced the polluting systems that had poisoned entire worlds. Some species initially resisted human leadership, fearing replacement of one dominant power with another, because their experience with the Council had taught them to be suspicious of anyone who claimed to want to help them. But humanity's actions consistently proved their commitment to equality as they shared their technology freely defended the weak without demanding tribute and elevated other species, rather than suppressing them for the sake of maintaining control. Admiral Wanho, now serving as Federation Defense Coordinator, established new principles for interstellar military action. that emphasized protection rather than conquest, and the Federation's forces became known as guardians rather than occupiers. The new fleet patrolled space lanes not to collect taxes or enforce arbitrary laws, but to protect merchant vessels from pirates and rescue ships in distress, regardless of their species or political affiliation. Young aliens studied human history not as cautionary tales about the dangers of unchecked power, but as inspiration for what could be achieved when beings worked together toward common goals instead of fighting over resources and territory. The story of humanity's survival and return became a symbol of hope for all oppressed peoples throughout the galaxy and proof that even the most powerful tyrants could be defeated by beings who refused to give up their dreams of freedom. Universities on dozens of worlds began teaching courses in human philosophy and ethics alongside their traditional subjects because the concepts of mercy in victory and strength through cooperation had proven their worth in the real world. As Daiho looked out at the diverse assembly of species working together to solve problems that affected everyone, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them from the wreckage of Earth to this moment of galactic unity. Humanity had been erased from galactic records by beings who feared their potential, but they had written themselves back into history with fire and determination and proved that destruction could not truly eliminate an idea whose time had come. More importantly, they had written themselves as heroes rather than conquerors, and had shown that true strength came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up and helping them achieve their own greatness. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, from natural disasters to unexplored regions where new forms of life might be waiting to join the Federation. But for the first time in millennia, all sentient beings faced those challenges. Together, exploration vessels crewed by mixed species teams ventured into uncharted regions of space, while terraforming projects turned dead worlds into garden paradises where refugees from destroyed planets could build new homes and new lives. The age of human fire had given way to the age of galactic unity, and the future burned bright with infinite possibilities as billions of beings worked together to build something greater than any single species could achieve. Alone, Captain Daiho smiled as he watched a group of young beings from 6 different species collaborating on a project to develop faster-than-light communication technology that would allow instant contact across the galaxy. The children did not see species barriers or ancient prejudices, but only the excitement of discovery and the joy of working with friends who happened to have different colored skin or different numbers of eyes or tentacles instead of arms. This was the true victory that humanity had won, not just the military defeat of their enemies, but the creation of a galaxy where every being could reach for the stars without fear and where cooperation had replaced conquest as the highest ideal. News of humanity's crushing victory spread across the galaxy like a shockwave that shattered the carefully constructed lies that had held the Galactic Council's empire together for centuries, and species that had been oppressed for millennia saw hope for the first time in their long and painful history. Dr. Yoon Seos' broadcast from the liberated research station Omega-7 revealed centuries of council lies and atrocities that had been hidden in classified databases, and the evidence was so overwhelming that even the most loyal alien citizens could not deny the truth any longer. The human fleet did not stop with one victory, but struck like lightning across 3 sectors simultaneously, with strike groups led by commanders like Dong-Wu and Ha-Jin hitting council installations that had been thought impregnable just days before. Each attack demonstrated not just human military prowess, but their technological superiority as alien fortresses that should have withstood months of siege. Warfare fell within hours to forces that seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. What truly shocked the galaxy was humanity's treatment of prisoners and civilians, because unlike the Council's brutal tactics that left entire populations traumatized, and broken humans showed mercy to those who surrendered and compassion to the innocent. Captured alien soldiers were treated with dignity and given medical care that was often better than what they had received in their own military, while human doctors worked alongside alien medics to save lives regardless of species or allegiance. This unexpected compassion created fractures within the alien alliance as species that had reluctantly supported the Council began to question their loyalty and wonder why they should fear beings who showed more honor in victory than the Council showed in peace. Diplomatic Officer Ji-yoon worked tirelessly to exploit these divisions by reaching out to moderate alien leaders and offering them partnerships based on equality and mutual benefit, rather than the fear and submission that had characterized Council rule. The psychological warfare was perhaps more effective than the military campaign because humans did not just defeat alien forces, they demonstrated superior ethics while doing so, and proved that strength could be combined with mercy in ways the Council had never understood. Every engagement became a lesson in human values as prisoners were released with messages for their governments, and civilian populations were protected from the fighting while human engineers worked to repair damage caused by years of neglect. Council worlds began to defect as their populations learned the truth about humanity's destruction and realized that the carefully maintained lie about human aggression had been created to justify an act of genocide that had no moral justification. The rebellion spread through the outer colonies like wildfire as oppressed species found the courage to stand up against their oppressors for the first time in centuries, while human forces provided support and protection for those brave enough to fight. General Seok-jin coordinated the liberation of alien prison worlds, where dissidents had been held for decades in conditions that violated every principle of civilized behavior, and the rescued prisoners became living testimony to Council brutality. Human medical officer Ye-jin worked alongside freed alien doctors to treat victims of Council experimentation and torture while documenting evidence that would be used in the war crimes trials that everyone knew were coming. These acts of liberation proved that humanity's return meant freedom for all oppressed peoples throughout the galaxy, and that the new order being born would be based on justice rather than the fear and intimidation that had characterized alien rule. The Council's authority collapsed like a house built on sand as more species chose humanity's banner over their former oppressors, and the old alliances that had seemed so strong crumbled under the weight of revealed truth. What had begun as a quest for justice had become a galactic revolution that would reshape the political landscape of the entire galaxy and establish new principles based on equality and cooperation rather than domination and exploitation. The final blow came when the Council's own security forces, led by converted alien officers who had witnessed human honor firsthand, turned against their masters and refused to fire on civilians who were demanding freedom. Admiral Korvac of the Council Home Fleet found himself facing a mutiny as his own officers questioned orders to bombard rebellious colonies, and many chose to surrender their ships rather than participate in the massacre of innocent beings. The revolution was complete when the Council chambers themselves were stormed by a coalition of human and alien forces working together to arrest the leaders who had committed crimes against entire species over the course of centuries. President Thane of the Galactic Council was captured while trying to flee in a luxury yacht loaded with stolen wealth and classified documents that provided even more evidence of the systematic oppression that had characterized his rule. The old order died not with the roar of weapons, but with the quiet click of restraints being placed on the wrists of beings who had thought themselves above the law and immune to the consequences of their actions. Humanity stood at the center of a new galactic order that they had not sought to create but had been forced to build by the moral vacuum left behind when the corrupt council system finally collapsed under its own weight. The trials would come later, and justice would be served. But for now, the galaxy was free for the first time in living memory, and billions of beings could look to the future with hope instead of fear. Captain Daeho stood in what had once been the council chambers and watched as representatives from dozens of species worked together to draft a new charter based on the principles that humanity had demonstrated through their actions rather than their words. The humans had proven that power could be wielded with restraint, and that victory did not require the destruction of one's enemies, but could instead lead to their redemption and transformation into allies and partners. The age of fear was ending, and the age of cooperation was beginning, with humanity serving not as conquerors, but as guardians of the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The Galactic Council's response came not in words, but in the brilliant flash of weapons fire, as 300 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace surrounding the human fleet with overwhelming numerical superiority that should have guaranteed victory against any conventional enemy. Council Admiral Voxter believed that superior numbers would compensate for any technological advantages the humans might possess, because in his experience, quantity had always defeated quality when the difference was large enough, and 300 ships against 50 seemed like impossible odds. He was catastrophically wrong and learned this lesson in the most painful way possible when Captain Su Young's destroyer Phoenix Rising demonstrated the folly of that assumption by single-handedly disabling 6 enemy cruisers in the opening exchange of the battle. Human weapons did not just penetrate alien shields. They adapted to them, learning and countering defensive measures in real time like living things that grew smarter with each shot fired and more deadly with each target destroyed. The alien fleet found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter their tactics before they could even implement them, because human ships had been studying alien combat doctrine for 3 centuries and knew every trick in their playbook. What truly terrified the alien forces was humanity's adaptability in combat, because when they tried to jam human communications, the human ships switched to quantum entanglement networks that could not be blocked or intercepted by any known technology. When aliens deployed energy-draining weapons designed to shut down enemy power systems, human vessels shifted to kinetic projectiles that required no energy to fire and could penetrate armor through pure kinetic force instead of exotic energy fields. Every countermeasure was met with an instant adaptation, as if the human ships were not just machines but living organisms that could evolve new capabilities in the middle of battle to overcome whatever obstacles their enemies placed in their path. Engineering Chief Chang Min rerouted power systems on his ship with the fluid grace of a master musician playing a complex symphony, redistributing energy flows to give weapons double their rated output while maintaining shield integrity and life support. Tactical Officer Na Yun predicted enemy movements with uncanny accuracy that bordered on precognition because she had studied alien psychology and military doctrine so thoroughly that she could anticipate their decisions before they made them. The turning point came when Commander Sung Min's battlecruiser Eternal Flame took concentrated fire from 12 alien dreadnoughts and should have been reduced to expanding plasma and scattered debris, but instead, something impossible happened. The ship's hull began to regenerate using nanotechnology reverse-engineered from a dozen different alien races, and the vessel literally healed itself while continuing to fight like a wounded animal that becomes more dangerous when cornered alien captains watched in horror as human ships absorbed their best attacks and continued advancing through walls of weapons. Fire that should have vaporized them, but instead seemed to make them stronger and more determined. It became clear that humanity had not simply survived their exile, but had evolved beyond their original limitations into something that combined the best aspects of every alien species they had encountered during their long journey through the darkness. The tide of battle shifted decisively when human reinforcements arrived, but they were not ships from hidden colonies as the aliens had expected, but something far worse for their morale and their chances of victory. The reinforcements were alien vessels that had been captured and modified by human engineers during covert operations over the past several years and seeing their own Technology turned against them with impossible efficiency, broke the alien fleet's spirit. Familiar ship designs moved with unfamiliar grace and fired familiar weapons with deadly accuracy that their original crews could never have achieved, because human modifications had unlocked capabilities that the original designers never knew existed. Admiral Voxter realized too late that humanity had not simply returned for revenge, but had come back to reclaim their rightful place as the galaxy's dominant technological force and to demonstrate that 3 centuries of exile had made them stronger, not weaker. His retreat order came just as human boarding parties began infiltrating his flagship, moving through alien corridors, like they owned them and displaying an intimate knowledge of ship layouts that suggested years of preparation and infiltration. The human boarders moved with mechanical precision, disabling security systems and capturing key personnel with non-lethal weapons that left their targets unconscious but unharmed, because humanity had learned to wage war with surgical precision. Within minutes, the alien flagship was under human control, and its crew found themselves prisoners aboard their own vessel, while human technicians began downloading classified information from the ship's computers with practiced efficiency. The surviving alien ships fled in disorder, leaving behind wreckage and debris that told the story of the most one-sided space battle in galactic history. While human vessels pursued them just long enough to ensure they would carry word of the defeat, news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light, as fleeing alien ships broadcast warnings about human capabilities that seemed impossible, but were backed up by sensor recordings that could not be disputed or explained away. Species that had been oppressed by the Galactic Council for centuries saw hope for the first time in generations as they realized that the seemingly invincible alien military had been defeated by beings who had been presumed extinct for 300 years. The message was clear and undeniable. Humanity was back, and they were no longer the victims they had once been, but predators who had returned to hunt those who had tried to destroy them and anyone who stood in their way. The age of alien dominance was ending, and the age of human supremacy was beginning with fire and steel and the terrible beauty of weapons that could reshape the balance of power. In the galaxy, with surgical precision, Admiral Wanho surveyed the battlefield where alien wreckage drifted among human ships that showed minimal damage, despite facing overwhelming odds, and he smiled knowing that this was just the beginning of humanity's campaign for justice. Admiral Wanho stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance, watching the stars bend and twist as his ship dropped out of hyperspace above the Galactic Council's primary fleet base, and around him 50 human warships materialized from seemingly empty space like predators emerging from tall grass to surround their prey. The human vessels hung in space with deadly grace, their hulls gleaming with unknown alloys that seemed to drink in the light from nearby stars while weapons ports glowed, with barely contained energy that made the space around them shimmer like heat waves rising from hot metal base. Commander Zethral had never seen ships like these in his 40 years of military service, and his reptilian eyes widened in shock as his sensors failed to get accurate readings on the mysterious vessels that seemed to absorb and deflect his scanning attempts with contemptuous ease. The human ships moved with predatory intelligence, adjusting their positions in perfect coordination. Without any visible communication between them and their designs, blended organic curves with angular aggression in ways that made veteran spacers feel uncomfortable just looking at them. Panic spread through the alien command center as junior officers tried to make sense of scanner readings that showed impossible energy signatures and weapon configurations that did not match anything in their databases, while senior commanders demanded answers that no one could provide. The communication came, on all frequencies simultaneously bypassing the base's security protocols, with such ease that it seemed like the humans were simply reaching through their defenses and turning on every screen and speaker in the facility without breaking a sweat. Wanho's Face appeared on every display from the largest tactical screens in the command center to the smallest personal communicators carried by maintenance workers, and his expression was calm, but his eyes burned with controlled fury that promised terrible consequences for past actions. "I am Admiral Wan Ho of the human fleet," he said in a voice that carried clearly through every speaker on the base, and his words fell into the stunned silence like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples of shock and disbelief that spread through the alien ranks. "We need to talk," he continued, and those 4 simple words carried more threat than entire speeches full of bluster and demands, because they implied that humanity had returned not as supplicants, begging for mercy, but as equals demanding satisfaction. According to their records, humans were extinct, and the Council had personally overseen their destruction 3 centuries ago in a campaign that had been swift and thorough and complete, with no survivors left to carry grudges or seek revenge for their murdered species. Yet here was undeniable proof that not only had humans survived, but they had returned with technology that made the Council's own fleets look like primitive boats floating on an ocean, while sleek submarines prowled beneath the Surface Council. Representative Mordok demanded to know how humans had survived and where they had been hiding during the centuries since their supposed extinction. But his voice cracked with fear as he spoke, because he already suspected that he would not like the answers. One host's smile was cold as the space between stars as he began his response. "We have been watching you," he said, and each word hit the aliens like a physical blow that left them reeling with the implications of what he was telling them. "Learning from you," he continued, and the alien commanders felt their blood turn to ice as they realized that humanity had been studying them for 300 years, cataloging their weaknesses, and preparing for this moment when they would emerge from hiding, growing stronger while you believed us dead. He added, and his smile grew wider as he watched the fear spread through the alien ranks like a plague that infected everyone who heard his words and understood what they meant. The human admiral began broadcasting evidence of the original conspiracy and ancient recordings of council meetings played on screens throughout the galaxy, showing alien leaders discussing humanity's destruction like they were planning to remove weeds from a garden. Orders to eliminate all traces of human civilization appeared in government databases across dozens of worlds, along with proof that Earth had been peaceful and posed no threat to anyone except in the paranoid imaginations of alien leaders who feared human creativity. The truth spread across galactic networks faster than the Council could contain it, and other alien species began to question the official history they had been taught about humanity's aggressive expansion and violent conquest of innocent worlds. Unrest began to spread through the outer systems as suppressed species saw an opportunity for freedom and rebellion against the Council that had ruled them with fear and lies for centuries while claiming to maintain peace and order. Wan Ho gave the Council 24 hours to respond to humanity's demands, and his list was simple but non-negotiable: acknowledgement of their crimes, reparations for the destroyed worlds, and recognition of humanity's right to exist among the stars. The alternative, he made clear, would be war on a scale the galaxy had never seen, and his tone suggested that he would prefer the military option because it would allow humanity to settle their debts with interest and establish their dominance once and for all. As the human fleet held position above the base, alien military commanders studied their formations with growing dread, because these were not the desperate refugees they had destroyed long ago, but apex predators returning to reclaim their place in the universe. The human ships maintained perfect spacing, and their weapons tracked potential targets with mechanical precision while their crews waited patiently for orders that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy with a few well-placed shots. Intelligence reports flooding in from across the galaxy painted a picture of human infiltration that had been going on for years, with sleeper agents embedded in key positions throughout alien society and technology that had been compromised in ways that no one had suspected. The base commanders realized that they were not facing a simple military threat, but a species that had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment and had returned with advantages that went far beyond superior weapons and ships. Humanity had evolved during their exile, becoming something more dangerous than the aliens who had tried to destroy them could possibly have imagined, and now they were back to collect payment for old debts with compound interest. The countdown had begun, and in less than 24 hours the galaxy would learn whether the Galactic Council would choose wisdom and admit their crimes or pride and face the consequences of their ancient decision to commit genocide against the human race. Trade Station Nexus Prime hung in space like a giant metal flower with its arms reaching out to catch ships from every corner of the galaxy, and Security Chief Vector walked through its crowded corridors with the confidence of someone who had kept peace among dozens of hostile alien species for over 20 years. The massive orbital platform served as neutral ground where even the most bitter enemies could meet to trade goods and information without fear of violence, because Vector and his security teams made sure that everyone followed the rules or faced immediate ejection into the cold vacuum of space. But lately, strange things had been happening on the station, and Vector was starting to lose sleep over reports that made no sense according to everything he knew about technology and the laws of physics that governed how machines were supposed to work. Ships were arriving at the station with systems that had been mysteriously upgraded while their crews slept, and the modifications were so advanced that even the best engineers in the galaxy could not figure out how they had been installed or what technology had been used to make them. Captain Borkin of the mining vessel Deep Digger had been the first to report the phenomenon when his cutting laser suddenly started slicing through asteroid cores like they were made of soft cheese instead of solid rock and metal that should have taken hours to penetrate. The reptilian captain had run every diagnostic test he could think of, but his ship's computer insisted that nothing had changed, and the laser was operating within normal parameters, even though it was clearly performing far beyond its original specifications. Security footage from the maintenance bay showed a figure in unmarked armor working on Borkin's ship during a routine service stop. But the being moved with such fluid grace and speed that the cameras could barely track its movements as it installed unknown components with practiced efficiency. Similar incidents began occurring throughout the station and beyond, as word spread through the galactic communication networks that something or someone was upgrading alien technology in ways that should have been impossible according to all known scientific principles. A freight hauler's engines suddenly doubled in efficiency, allowing the massive cargo ship to make runs that had previously required 2 trips while using half the fuel and producing emissions so clean that environmental scanners could barely detect them. A passenger liner's life support systems began producing air so pure that travelers reported feeling more energetic and healthy after just a few hours aboard the ship, even though the modifications were invisible to the naked eye and showed up on no diagnostic equipment. Patrol ships found that their sensors could suddenly detect cloaked vessels that had been completely invisible before the upgrades, and their weapon systems displayed targeting accuracy that made veteran gunners weep with joy at the precision they could now achieve. The modifications were appearing on ships from every species and every class, from tiny scout vessels to massive dreadnoughts, and each upgrade was perfectly tailored to the specific needs and capabilities of the vessel and its crew, as if whoever was doing the work understood alien technology better than the aliens who had built it. Galactic Council scientists studied the modifications with growing frustration, because they could not replicate the improvements or even understand how they functioned, and every attempt to reverse engineer the upgrades resulted in system failures and damaged equipment. The improvements seemed to blend seamlessly with existing systems as if they had always been part of the original design, and removing them caused the entire ship to stop working properly, like trying to remove a vital organ from a living creature. Fear began to spread among the ruling alien species because Someone was out there in the darkness demonstrating technological superiority that challenged their assumed dominance over the galaxy and their carefully maintained belief that they represented the pinnacle of scientific achievement. The modifications were not random acts of kindness, but carefully planned messages designed to be discovered by those who would spread word of their existence throughout the galaxy, like seeds planted in fertile soil that would grow into something much larger. And, more dangerous, council representatives held emergency meetings in secured facilities where they debated possible explanations for the phenomenon, ranging from a previously unknown species emerging from deep space to some kind of artificial intelligence that had achieved technological singularity, but none of their theories could explain the surgical precision of the modifications or the deep understanding of alien psychology that was evident in every upgrade, because whoever was doing this work knew exactly which improvements would be most valued by each species and how to implement them without detection. Station engineer Mi Young listened to the alien security forces scramble for answers they would never find while she worked in the maintenance tunnels deep beneath the station's main levels where few beings ever ventured and fewer still paid attention to a quiet human in coveralls. She had been living among the aliens for 2 years, learning their systems and studying their weaknesses while preparing for the day when humanity would emerge from the shadows to reclaim their place among the stars with fire and advanced technology. Her modifications were just the beginning of a much larger plan that had been set in motion by human colonies scattered across the galaxy, and every improvement she installed was a message to her people that the time for hiding was almost over. Working in the deepest levels of Nexus Prime, she had access to the station's core systems, and every transaction, every communication, every security protocol passed through networks that she had quietly infiltrated over months of patient work. The aliens trusted their security systems completely because they had built them, and they believed that no other species could possibly understand their technology well enough to compromise it. But humans had spent 3 centuries studying alien science and learning to improve it. Mi Young had inserted herself into the station's maintenance roster. Using forged credentials that were so perfect, they had passed every security check because she understood the alien bureaucracy better than most aliens and knew exactly what documents would be accepted without question. Her living quarters were hidden in an abandoned section of the station where broken equipment was stored and forgotten, and she had turned the space into a workshop where she could build the modifications that were causing such panic among the galactic authorities. Every night, she would emerge from her hiding place to work on ships in the maintenance bays, installing improvements that would make their crews more effective and their vessels more capable, while leaving no trace of her presence except the upgrades themselves. The work was dangerous, because discovery would mean immediate execution. But Mi Young had volunteered for this mission, knowing that her sacrifice would help prepare the galaxy for humanity's return and the revolution that would follow. She completed another modification and watched the upgraded ship depart for destinations unknown. She smiled, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, human fleet commanders were receiving reports about alien ships with mysteriously improved capabilities. The ghost in the machine was preparing the battlefield, and soon the galaxy would learn that humanity had not only survived their attempted extinction, but had grown stronger and more capable than their enemies could possibly imagine. When the time came, humanity would know exactly where to strike and how to disable the alien fleets that had once seemed so powerful and invincible, because Mi Young and others like her had been mapping their weaknesses for years. Captain Dae-ho pressed his face against the cold metal window of his ship and stared into the endless black space where Earth should have been floating like a blue jewel among the stars, but instead he saw only darkness and broken rocks drifting, like the bones of some ancient giant that had died long ago. His hands shook as he gripped the window frame, because this was the moment he had been waiting for his entire life, the moment when he would finally see the home world that his grandmother had told him stories about when he was just a small boy sitting on her lap in the cramped quarters of Colony Ship 7. The bridge behind him was silent, except for the soft humming of machines and the quiet breathing of his crew who had followed him across half the galaxy to find this place that existed now only in old stories and faded photographs hidden in secret compartments on forgotten ships. Navigator Sojin sat at her station with tears running down her cheeks as she checked the star charts for the 100th time, her fingers dancing across the glowing screen like she was trying to make the numbers lie to her, but the coordinates were correct, and the stars were in their proper places, and Earth was simply gone. Engineer Taemin ran his scanners across the empty space again and again, hoping to find some trace of the world that had given birth to humanity. But all he could detect were chunks of rock and metal floating in patterns that spoke of terrible violence and complete destruction that had happened so long ago that even the debris had grown cold. The silence stretched on until pilot Hyejin spoke in a voice so quiet that Daeho had to strain to hear her words. She said, "Captain, the deep scans are showing something. Buried in the asteroid field, something that might have been part of a city or maybe even a whole continent before it was blown apart." Daeho felt his heart skip a beat because finding any piece of Earth, even a broken piece, would mean that the stories were true, and that humans had really come from this place that was now nothing but scattered rocks floating in the void, like a puzzle that could never be put back together. The crew worked for hours, using their ship's sensors to map every piece of debris they could find, and slowly a picture began to form of what had happened here 300 years ago when the Galactic Council had decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Taemin found traces of metal that could only have come from human cities, and Sojin discovered fragments of satellites that still carried faint signals, broadcasting messages of love and hope and dreams in languages that no one in the galaxy spoke anymore, except for the few million humans who had escaped the destruction as they searched through the wreckage. Daeho remembered the stories his grandmother had told him about Earth with its blue oceans and white clouds and cities that sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight, where humans had lived and loved and built beautiful things before the aliens came with their weapons and their fear. His grandmother had been on one of the last ships to escape before the planet was destroyed, and she had spent the rest of her life on a mining colony at the edge of nowhere, teaching the children about the world they had lost and making them promise to never forget where they came from. The other human colonies scattered across the outer rim had similar stories of narrow escapes and desperate flights into the darkness where they had hidden for 3 centuries, growing slowly and quietly, while the rest of the galaxy forgot that humans had ever existed at all. But humans are stubborn creatures, and they had spent those 300 years not just surviving, but learning and growing stronger in ways that would have terrified the aliens if they had known what was happening in the forgotten corners of space where the last children of Earth were building something new. Young, Hyejin was the first to find the data cores buried deep in what had once been a government building on Earth, and when she cracked the encryption and saw what was inside, she let out a scream of rage that echoed through the ship like the cry of a wounded animal. The files contained the real truth about why Earth had been destroyed, and it was not the story that the galaxy had been told about human aggression and violent expansion, but something much worse and much more frightening for the aliens who had ordered the destruction. The records showed that humans had never attacked anyone or tried to conquer other worlds, but had instead been peaceful traders and explorers who wanted nothing more than to learn about the galaxy and make friends with the other species they met among the stars. What had terrified the Galactic Council was not human violence, but human creativity, because humans had a gift that no other species possessed: the ability to take alien technology and improve it in ways that its creators had never imagined possible. Human engineers could look at an alien weapon or ship or computer and see not just what it was, but what it could become if someone understood how to make it better and stronger and more efficient than the aliens who had built it could ever dream. This gift had made humans valuable as partners and employees, but it had also made them dangerous because if humans could improve alien technology, then eventually humans might become more advanced than the aliens themselves, and that was a thought that terrified the ruling species. So the Galactic Council had made a decision that would haunt the galaxy for centuries. They would destroy humanity completely and erase all records of their existence, so that no one would ever know that humans had lived or what they had been capable of achieving. The data cores contained recordings of the council meetings where alien leaders had discussed the human problem like they were talking about removing a virus from a computer system cold and calculating and completely without mercy or compassion. Dae-ho watched the recordings with growing fury as he saw how the aliens had planned every detail of humanity's destruction from the surprise attacks on human colonies to the final bombardment of Earth itself, until nothing remained but debris floating in space. When the data download was complete, Hyejin looked up at her captain with fire in her eyes and said the words that would change everything. "Captain, we need to tell the colonies what we found here because it's time for the galaxy to know that humans are still alive and we remember everything." News of the discovery spread through the hidden human settlements like wildfire carried by quantum communicators that the aliens didn't even know existed, because humans had learned to hide not just their bodies but their voices as well during the long years of exile. Within days, every human colony from the ice worlds of the outer dark to the mining stations of the Broken Ring had received copies of the files and seen the truth about what had happened to their home world and why they had been forced to live like ghosts for 3 centuries. Colony leader Jin Woo called for an emergency. Gathering on Aurora Station, the largest human settlement and representatives from 12 hidden colonies made dangerous journeys through alien space to attend a meeting that would decide the future of their species. The meeting hall was packed with humans who had lived their entire lives in hiding, people who had been born in the darkness between stars and raised on stories of a world they had never seen, but still called home in their hearts. Dr. Yoon-hee presented the evidence they had found at Earth, while military commander Kyung-soo outlined the ships and weapons that the colonies had built in secret during their long exile, preparing for a day that many had thought would never come. As the humans talked and planned, Dae-ho felt something changing in the room, like a fire that had been smoldering for centuries was finally ready to burst into flames that would light up the entire galaxy. The vote was unanimous. Every single representative agreed that the time for hiding was over and that humanity would return to the galaxy not as refugees begging for mercy, but as warriors demanding justice for the greatest crime in galactic history. They would come with fire and fury and the advanced technology they had developed, in secret, and they would make sure that the galaxy never forgot the name of the species that the Galactic Council had tried so hard to erase from existence. The age of human hiding was ending, and the age of human vengeance was about to begin.